Welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We have a great show planned, a lot to talk about. First, I want to provide an addendum, if you will, or a little bit of a correction to last week's episode. Tim from the Netherlands had emailed about a rating deflation correction where he lives, where he gained about 150 points. And I said I wasn't sure about FIDE and what was happening. It turns out that FIDE did implement a ratings deflation correction earlier this year. And on our YouTube channel, bluefin.64 commented about that. So I appreciate the info. So I looked into this further. And here was Bluefin64's comment. He says, FIDE did a ratings adjustment for deflation with a formula of 2,000 minus your rating times 40%. So the rating floor was raised from 1,000 to 1,400 and 2,000 players get no points. Higher ratings will increase over time from trickle up. So basically, depending on your rating, there's an increase of up to 400 points to compensate for deflation, and players over 2,000 will not get any correction. There is a chess.com article that explains this very well. I'm going to link it up in the show notes. It's called FIDE Adjusts Ratings for 350,000 Players in Major Change. And there's 4 tenets to this adjustment. It's an adjustment of up to 400 rating points, as we said, an adjustment of the rating floor, changes in the initial rating, and reinstallment of the 400-point rule. So basically what that means in practice, and I'm taking this from the chess.com article, the formula means players will have somewhere between 0 and 400 ELO points added to their ratings. Players rated at exactly 1,000 would get an increase of 400 points, while a 1,500 player would increase their rating by 200 points. A player rated at 1950 will only get 20 points added. So I won't get into details now. You can check out this article. Again, I'll link it up. Thank you to bluefin.64 for the comment. And I just wanted to be a little more thorough than I was last week. So FIDE did make a change. Now, for US chess, they haven't done anything recently. They probably should, and I hope they do. As I said last week, I like the idea of starting unrated players at 1,400 and then doing an increase of anywhere from 100 to 150 points. Although what FIDE did, something similar, maybe not those exact numbers, but I kind of like that as well. I'm just looking online. US chess apparently does implement measures over the years to combat deflation. According to what I'm reading here, in 2001, they implemented a new rating system to reinflate ratings, and US chess regularly reviews and adjusts the rating system to maintain meaningful and comparable ratings over time. But they really haven't done anything recently. We're in 2024. I know it's being proposed, but if we hear anything as far as US chess, we'll definitely let you know. But again, FIDE did actually implement rating deflation measures earlier this year. So again, you can check out the article if you want to find out more about that. Also, there is a poll on both Spotify and Twitter on whether you would remind your opponent to press his clock if he forgets and if he's an experienced tournament player. I'm going to discuss those results next week. Now, by the time you're hearing this, I'm not sure if that poll is still going to be active, but I just wanted to give it a little bit more time to get some more results. So again, we'll discuss that next week. All right, moving on. Last week's episode, admittedly, I had a lengthy call to action segment. I was asking for all of you to give back in a way that will not cost you a dime. Remember, I do not put any content behind a paywall. There's no type of membership or Patreon requirement to send in questions, comments, or topic ideas for the show. So thank you. Thank you to all of you who subscribed to our YouTube channel. We're now at 930. So we need another 70 to get to 1,000. And I'm recording this a little bit earlier in the week than when I usually do. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to our Chess Angle Podcast YouTube channel. You can search for it on YouTube. There is always a link in the show notes as well. Also, if you're enjoying the pod, I would be most appreciative if you would give us a 5-star rating in your podcast app of choice. Those reviews help with promotion visibility, search engine optimization. It also helps attract potential listeners. We're doing very well. Don't get me wrong, but of course, the more reviews, the better. It's the type of thing you can never have enough. And in addition, and this is mystifying to me, but some chess players, believe it or not, have not heard of the chess angle, even though they enjoy consuming chess content. So please spread the word to your chess playing friends. Say something at your local club. Word of mouth is always very powerful, so we appreciate that. So that being said, let's talk about chess, and we're going to begin by hearing what you had to say.
You've got mail.
All right, so here's our first email. Hi, Neil. I'm Paul from Munich. I really enjoy listening to the pod. I started playing chess more seriously in March this year, and your podcast motivated me to go to a local club. Thanks for that. It is great to meet people loving the game as well. Furthermore, OTB is much more fun than playing online. I'm writing you for two reasons. One, in one of your episodes, I unfortunately cannot remember which one, you mentioned the learning courses provided by chess.com, and that in one of the future episodes, you want to talk about which courses you would recommend doing. I would really appreciate your take on that, since there are just so many courses, and I would like to use my limited study time as best as possible. Also, I'm curious on your take on that topic. Number two, regarding your YouTube channel, as you asked for our help, I started following you on YouTube. Nevertheless, the current status of the channel does not really provide any benefit compared to just using a podcast app like Spotify. But in your last episode, number 125, you mentioned the problem with the moving image, or not moving image in your case, and that this prevents you from getting more attraction, from gaining more attraction, excuse me. Actually, I would love watching your analyzing episodes on YouTube if you would just record your screen while going through the analysis of chess.com. This would be a big benefit compared to using Spotify, as it will be much easier to follow you, and maybe this could even be the start of something new. Also, it has the benefit that it should not really interrupt your current workflow, like a win-win situation with no downsides. At the end, I would like to say, I do like that you reach out to your community for input on future episodes, and that you answer the questions sent into you. This is something new, and also what brings me to writing this for the first time in an email. Keep up the great work, and as always, I hope you win your next game. Best regards, Paul. All right, thanks so much for your email, Paul. Some great comments. I appreciate the kind words. So let's unpack these individually, because you got a bunch of things going on there. So as far as the chess.com lessons, which, yes, I think are excellent. I think they're underutilized. I think people go on chess.com to play blitz and speed chess, and then they miss out on all this great instructional material. So in episode 99 of this podcast, it was called How to Approach Chess Study as a Beginner or Advanced Beginner. I did list in the show notes of that episode with links, chess.com lessons that I recommend. So you can start there. And then second, regarding the YouTube channel, I liked your comments there. Now, when you say the channel doesn't provide any benefit because you're already listening in an app, I understand that. Most people are going to listen on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, and they're going to do so while doing something else. They actually prefer just the audio because they're doing it while driving or while commuting or while doing household tasks. Same for me. I mean, I'm a big podcast consumer as well, but I pretty much only listen in the car, to and from work, or if I'm doing errands by myself, because at home there's just other distractions. So for me to watch a video podcast, it can be tough. However, some people actually do like consuming it that way. The other advantage of YouTube or even our website is some people listen at work. If they're working on a computer, they prefer having a tab open on their desktop just so everything's in one place rather than have to deal with their desktop and opening something on their phone. So if you're listening like on a laptop or a desktop or like a work computer, sometimes it's easier to just do it that way. So it's just an option for people. So regarding actual YouTube videos that are instructional, actual chess videos, like with a board and arrows and everything, you're actually a step ahead of me, Paul. So the final piece of my content creation pursuits, I was going to announce this down the road, but I might as well do it now since you mentioned it, Paul. I do plan on starting a Long Island Chess Club YouTube channel, or I should say, I already did start a Long Island Chess Club YouTube channel, but I'm not really announcing it publicly until now because I'm still kind of tinkering with it. It's in the early stages. If you look it up, it's on YouTube, Long Island Chess Club, and there are only 3 videos on there. When you look at these 3 videos, you can tell I'm still kind of like finding my way with video and editing. And don't get me wrong, I stand by those 3 videos. They're very good. They're instructive. They're in 4K. But here's the goal for the Long Island Chess Club YouTube channel, because I know a lot of you were asking about if I plan on doing something like that. So that channel is going to be designed, as with the podcast, for busy adults with limited study time who aren't going to be able to look at a 45-minute or a 40-minute YouTube video. I'm going to keep them short. Most of them are going to be around 10 minutes, 8 minutes, maybe 7 to 10 minutes, that range. I think the longest one I'm going to have is maybe 15 minutes. There might be one on there that's 12 minutes. I don't have it in front of me, but they're going to be short. They're going to cover just 1 or 2 concepts per video, which is what it should be. It shouldn't be like, 45 chess concepts you must know. That's too much information to process in one video. And this way, as a busy adult, you're waiting for your kid's soccer practice to finish and you have 10 minutes to kill, you'll be able to watch a whole video. You're in the waiting room at the doctor's office, you'll be able to watch a video. You pop your earbuds in. You're waiting for your kid's piano lesson, you can check out the video. You're on a lunch break at work. Because the videos are short, you'll be able to consume them. That's really the point, is to kind of have these short videos. I mean, they're long form videos because it's not like a 30-second short, but as I said, 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes, around that range. That's the goal. They're going to be 4K quality. The audio is going to be good. Like, I want the quality to be good. With the 3 that are there now, you can kind of tell again that I'm finding my way. The reason I haven't said anything till now, I'm kind of waiting until I get an established workflow that's not going to be overwhelming for me and make a big footprint on my schedule, but yet still have quality videos. And once I get about 8 to 10 of them on there and I get a momentum going, then I'll do a formal announcement. But I'm just mentioning it now, Paul, because you brought it up. Why not? So if you want to check out the Long Island Chess Club YouTube channel, while it's still in its very early and very preliminary stages, I'm still finding my footing. You can go check it out. I'll link up the site and the video, and I'll make a note in the show notes that it's all very preliminary. So I promise you the videos are going to get better and some of the production values are going to get better. But I mean, I stand by what's on there. The 3 videos on there, they're good videos. They're in 4K. They're not as fancy with some of the graphics and the editing and the colors that some of the other sites have, but I'll get there. And then I'm done. So that's it. I have enough. I have no interest in streaming. I have no interest in writing a book. I have no interest in doing a Chessable course. I'm done after this. It's a good life. I have the club, and then I have the podcast. The podcast, I guess, is 1A and 1B, right? 1A would be the actual audio podcast. That's my baby. And then 1B would be the YouTube channel for the podcast, which is essentially just a repurposing of the audio. The only tweak for the YouTube channel for the podcast is I might do a video version of me recording it. So the audio would be the same, but you would actually see a video of me speaking into the mic. I'm thinking about doing that. And then the second phase would be the Long Island Chess Club YouTube channel, which is just getting underway. I'm not putting any pressure on myself. That'll happen when it happens. And then I'm done. That's it. So as far as YouTube, it'll be the Chess Angle podcast, which is strictly the podcast, and then the Long Island Chess Club channel, which will be instructional videos. I do believe, as many creators do, that you should separate them. I didn't want to put both things on both channels because people might go for different purposes. Like, I want the podcast channel to be people who are there just for the podcast, and then the Long Island Chess Club channel to be just for instructional videos. So that's the plan. So thanks for bringing that up, Paul. And your last sentence, as far as you like that I reach out to the community for input on future episodes? Yeah, absolutely. Because if there's something that interests you or any listener, then other people are definitely interested in it as well. And as I always say, as long as it fits the vibe of the show, as long as it's something I feel comfortable talking about, I'll definitely speak about it or have an episode about it. Or what I could do if it's a really good topic idea, but I feel like I'm not the best person to speak about it, I can always invite a guest that I know who knows more about it than I do. So thanks so much, Paul, for your great email. Some really good points. Our next email is from Joe. He says, "Hi, Neil. Thanks for your work on the pod. It is a routine listen for me and has been helpful for my chess. Your decluttering your repertoire episode was great and convinced me to focus my openings. I'm curious to know your opinion related to using chess study materials. Do you think it's more beneficial to go back through tactics books and game collections I have already completed to fill in gaps and reinforce ideas, or should I move on to new tactic books and game collections? For example, I finished Logical Chess Move by Move about 1 year ago. Is it better to study that resource again, or to move on to something like The Most Instructive Games of Chess Ever Played, 62 Masterly Games of Chess Strategy? Same for tactics workbooks. Is it worth completing the same tactics books, or should I work through a new book?" All right, thanks, Joe, for the email. This is what I call a private lesson question. It's kind of hard to know without working with you and seeing your game. Now, what you're kind of referring to is the woodpecker method versus like studying new material. The woodpecker method is basically where you take the same set of tactical puzzles and you work through them over and over again, but with less time. So for example, let's say you have a set of 8 puzzles, you give yourself X amount of time to go through them and solve them. And then you solve them again, but this time you give yourself less time. So you're solving them faster each time. Now, I would say this, with the material you've already studied, if you feel like it's penetrating you and you're absorbing the info, then maybe move on to new stuff. If you take a look at it again and it seems brand new to you, like you're doing it from scratch because it really didn't take, then maybe it's better to review the same material. It's really hard to know without working with you, but you kind of have to experiment. So you said, should you go back through the book again, start it again, and if you're getting a lot of them wrong, or if you're having trouble remembering, even though you went through it already, then it might make sense to go through it again. If it's coming back to you and you're kind of whipping through it, then I would focus on some new material. I mean, obviously, the more tactics and patterns that you expose yourself to, the bigger vocabulary you'll have, so to speak. But I would just test it out. Look at some of this material that you went through already. And if you're finding that you're going through it pretty easily because you remember it, well, then move on to something else. If you're finding you're kind of struggling with it again, then it might be good to repeat it. And repetition is always good to a certain degree. Like I do plan on reading The Amateur's Mind again at some point. That's my next project because when I first read it, it was many, many years ago. So after all this experience I've had, I'm going to be very, very curious to see what it's like to read it now. And I'm sure I'll still pick up some ideas. It's kind of like if you read a great novel when you're in high school and then you read it again as an adult with much more life experience, it takes on a completely different meaning. I mean, that might be a little bit too deep of an analogy, but you get the idea. So just play around with it. So you can do a woodpecker type method where you keep repeating the same material, or you can look at new material, but just experiment. See how you make out with the material that you already went through. And if you find that it's almost like you're looking at it from scratch, then go through it again. But without working with you specifically, that's kind of the best I can answer that. But thanks so much for your email, Joe. We're now going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about playing in tournaments and whether or not you should withdraw, and also whether you should play up in a higher section. Should be a very interesting conversation. That's coming up after these quick messages. Okay, so let's talk about chess tournaments. Now, I'm going to explore 2 questions this week. Number 1, should you ever withdraw from a tournament? Should you always finish an event and play every round? Or are there times where the best choice will be to cut your losses and drop out? We're going to look at that. And number 2, should you, what they say, play up right? Should you play up? That is where you play in a section that is above the rating range you qualify for. So for example, if you're rated 1450, should you play in, say, the under 1700 instead of the under 1500, even though you qualify for the under 1500? We're going to talk about that as well. And very important, I need to give the context for this discussion. We're going to explore this strictly from a ratings point of view, from increasing your ratings. That's the tack I'm taking. So if you're a recreational player who has no interest in tournaments, good for you. That's probably smart. Or, if you're a tournament player who's just doing it as a quote unquote activity, like there are tournament players who genuinely don't care about their rating and it's just an activity, then this doesn't apply to you. All right. But even if you're one of those people, you may want to listen anyway. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. So let's talk about withdrawing from a tournament. Is that something you should do? Let's talk about the tournament hall itself and the room and the environment, because that has a lot to do with the psychology of withdrawing from a tournament. And this is what I propose to you. The tournament hall, as far as I see it, is based on ego and status. If you think about it, look at how the room is designed when you enter a tournament. It's all about ego and status. The board order, right? The higher rated players are always on the top boards, and generally the weaker and the lower rated players are on the lower boards, right? And that's clearly visible. The wall chart, which lists the players and their ratings, it's essentially almost like a wall of shame, right? Because the higher rated players are always listed first and the lower rated players are listed on the bottom. In addition, the Swiss system, which is the standard and most popular pairing system for tournaments, it really is an inequitable system if you think about it, particularly in the early rounds, because the top half always plays the bottom half. So if you're higher rated, you generally get a better pairing. And then with the Swiss system, when you lose, you essentially, in my view, you're getting penalized twice, because when you lose, you're losing rating points, and then you generally get a lousy pairing in the next round. Maybe not, because you might play someone who also lost but is high rated, but generally speaking, it's like a 1-2 punch. You lose rating because of your loss, and then you generally get a lousy pairing in the next round. That's the Swiss system. Now, there are some alternatives to the Swiss system that I actually like random pairings and accelerated pairings, things like that. I won't discuss that now. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I wish more TDs would consider those systems, because I think they do a lot to sort of tweak the inequities of the Swiss system, especially in the early rounds. It makes it a little more fair, but that's a separate discussion for another day. And I want to give an example of the role that ego plays. Now, there was a titled player on Long Island. I may have related this story, but it's been a while, so that's okay. And someone had posted on our Facebook page, it was an amateur player, where it was like, I'm getting frustrated and I'm losing and my rating's not increasing. And a titled player chimed in on our Facebook page and said something like, I don't know why everyone is so worried about rating. I just play for fun. You should just play for fun. And he was a titled player, like higher than National Master. I don't want to say more than that. I'm not looking to identify anybody. But in a way, when a titled player tells an amateur, like, oh, you should just play for fun, I just play for fun, that's a little disingenuous. It's kind of like a millionaire telling somebody, oh, why is everyone concerned about money? Or someone who is conventionally very, very attractive saying, well, I don't know why people care about looks, right? Or someone who's really skinny or has a six-pack, abs saying, well, I don't know why people are so concerned about losing weight in their body, because they've already achieved that. So when a titled player tells an amateur player, oh, just play for fun, it's a little disingenuous because they've already achieved that, right? Just my take there. And anyway, so this titled player does this whole post, well, I just play for fun and you should just play for fun. And yet he came to a Long Island Chess Club tournament. It was one of our major events. He was paired against an 1800 player in the first round. He loses, he gets upset, and he drops out of the tournament. So he's spewing this whole speech about, well, I just play for fun. I just do it for fun. Yet he gets upset in the tournament and drops out. after just the first round, which completely negates everything he said and shows that it really wasn't sincere. All right. So ego definitely plays a huge role. And I will tell you now, as a tournament director, I've gotten many excuses over the years for players who withdraw after the first round. And it's generally after they lose to a much lower rated player. It's very hard for higher rated players to rationalize that. It's very, very tough on the ego. This tournament chess is tough on the ego. And when a higher rated opponent loses in round one to a lower rated opponent, they sometimes can't handle that. And rather than admit that's why they're dropping out, I've gotten all sorts of excuses. Well, my schedule changed and, I have to fix my car door, or they'll say even, well, I'm no longer eligible for a prize. In our yearly tournament in the spring, we have like a major tournament with higher prizes. And, what happens is I'll get some higher rated players who show up just for that because the prize money is higher, which, that's another thing is people who play like just for the prize money. I mean, really. But anyway, they will literally drop out just because they're no longer eligible for a prize, which is kind of sad because, the truth is it is pretty competitive. So if you lose even just one game, you probably won't get first place, and they just drop out. That's crazy. To drop out after just one round is kind of crazy, but it happens all the time. And in addition, some of these players who drop out after the first round, they'll hide. They'll disappear for months. It's like they'll lose that one game. I won't see them for months. And just because of that one game, they get into this despondent state where like they believe they have to revamp their entire game and their entire study regimen just because of that one loss. I mean, these anomalous losses to lower rated players, they're going to happen. It's part of tournament chess, but some players can't handle that. And the point I'm trying to make here is you'd be surprised how many people drop out even after just one round. So this brings us to the question, should you withdraw from a tournament? Is that ever a smart move? Now let's be clear about the rules here. You have the right to withdraw from an event at any time. So just to be clear, you are allowed to do that. That's your right. If you want to withdraw, you can. And note that if you withdraw after playing even just one round, the entry fee is not refundable. So keep that in mind. I mean, most people know that and they're willing to eat that, but that's the rule. As soon as you play just one game, you can't get the entry fee back. And so to answer that, should you withdraw? I believe that yes. In my opinion, from a ratings standpoint, which is how we're looking at this, it's sometimes a prudent choice to drop out of an event rather than continue playing. I'm going to talk more about that coming up. Now, there are two general types of tournaments because this goes to context. You have your major weekend events and you have your weekly club game. Two very different scenarios. Now, weekend events, let's talk about the logistics. Weekend events are a big deal. It's usually anywhere from 5, it could be up to 9 rounds, especially if it's a holiday weekend and it's like a Friday through Monday type of thing, or maybe a Friday through Sunday, something like that. It's a major commitment. It really is, especially if you have a family. You have to really clear the decks, as they say. You have to clear the decks mentally, logistically. You kind of have to work that out with your family. It's a big deal. And if you're going to play well, your mind has to be completely clear, which is tough to do because you're thinking about family stuff. You're thinking about household responsibilities. You're thinking about work. Very big deal. The other thing with the weekend tournaments, you're generally playing 2 games per day. And these are 2 classical games per day with long time controls. Each game can last several hours, which to me is moronic. Like to play like 2 games a day, that's a lot. Next thing, these weekend tournaments are very expensive. Very expensive. You're looking at the entry fee, the hotel, food, and travel. I mean, I know for me, like food's going to be a big deal. I'm not one of these people like I can have half a bagel at 8 in the morning and I'm good for like 10 hours. I'm an eater. I need to eat something like every 2 hours, right? For me, just having breakfast, lunch, and dinner is not going to cut it. So, food's expensive, travel, the hotel, it's a lot of money. It's hundreds of dollars. And then the other thing that I have an issue with for me personally, the fact that there's no cell phones in the playing hall. How does your family get in touch with you? What if there's an emergency? Like, I don't like that. I get that cheating's an issue with the smartphones, but the fact that I wouldn't be connected and that you have to turn your cell phone off or that you can't even bring it in the playing hall, Like, I have a problem with that. That's one of the main reasons I don't really play in weekend events anymore. I don't really like that rule, but I get that they have to weigh that against potential cheating. And then the other thing with weekend tournaments, there are lots of kids. Most of the opponents are kids, apparently. I mean, I have guys at the club saying they went to these major tournaments, and out of 7 rounds, 5 of their opponents were kids. Now, it's not as much of a big deal for me, but I know many of you listening really don't like to play kids, so that's something you need to keep in mind at these weekend events. Now, let's go to your weekly club situation. Club level chess, which is my thing, I absolutely love it. It's a significantly different scenario, significantly different ecosystem. So with your weekly club, it's generally one game each week. It's usually at night during the week, whatever, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, because people work during the day, and weekends are very tough because people have things with their kids and errands, household responsibilities. So it's generally at night during the week. And then when your game's done, you get to go home, right? You drive whatever, 20 minutes, half hour, you drive home, you're done. If you have a tough loss in your weekly club game, you have a full week to shake it off, which is huge. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. Those are the main differences. Your weekly club game, it's just one game each week. With the weekend events, you're kind of shoving all this chess into a short amount of time. So that leads to the question, should you withdraw? Whether it's a weekend or a club event, that doesn't matter. You should definitely not drop out after round 1. I spoke about that earlier. That's absolutely absurd, but many do. I know for major events, many will re-enter and pay the extra fee. Some of them have like a re-entry option, but then again, you got to pay the extra fee for that. And of course, the game you played still counts. That's still a rated game. Like if you lose round 1 and you re-enter, I mean, that game you played is still on the books. All right. So it's not going to change. It's not going to cancel the rating points that you would lose from that. Now, as far as should you withdraw, we need to talk about tilt, because that is the reason why I think sometimes it does make sense to withdraw. Let's talk about what tilt is. Most of you know it, but I'm going to define it for the uninitiated. Tilt is something that comes from the poker world. What tilt means in poker, and then I'll relate it to chess. Tilt basically means you lose a hand in poker. You lose a tough hand that you should have won. Maybe it was a bad beat, and you completely lose emotional control. You're annoyed and you're frustrated and you're just playing to get your money back. And you had this nice disciplined plan in place, and that goes out the window. You start making these crazy bets, and it's all about getting your money back as soon as possible. They call that tilting or being on tilt. Tilt in the chess world would be you lose a really tough game, and now you're emotionally distraught, and you just try to get the rating points back as soon as possible. So instead of being patient and playing chess the way you're supposed to, it's all about revenge. And it creates this mindset where you're really frustrated and you just start playing poorly because you just want to get your rating points back as soon as possible. A lot of people tilt when they play online chess. We all know that. They'll lose a few games in a row, and then they start scrambling to get their rating points back, and then they play even worse. That's what tilt is. And as far as chess tournaments, if you're tilting, there's no point in continuing playing as far as I'm concerned. So in that case, yes, you should withdraw. You're just going to keep hemorrhaging rating points because you're going to be thinking about revenge rather than the game in front of you and enjoying the position, enjoying the process. You're just going to be obsessed with getting your rating points back. And if you're in that mindset, you're on tilt and you need to walk away. Maybe you should take a bye. Like that's another option. If you don't withdraw, maybe you can take a bye and then get your head straight. But for some people, even taking that one bye is not going to be enough. And the other thing, and this goes along with tilt, the idea of playing a second game on the same day immediately after a tough, drawn-out loss is ludicrous to me. In my mind, it's not normal to be able to bounce back. I shouldn't say it's not normal, but it's mystifying to me that some people can do that. I mean, if they can have this really tough loss that, it dragged out for hours, and as a result, the next game is only a half hour away, to shake off that emotional baggage and play another game immediately with a clear head, I don't know how people do that. I can't do that. Like for me, I know that tilt for me is real. Tilt is a problem for me. It's another reason I don't play in these weekend events, because when I tilt pretty badly, And so that's why I like the club level, because if I just have a stinker of a game, by the time I show up to the club next week, it's out of my system. But with weekend tournaments, you can't do that. So you could have this drawn out end game. It was like down to the wire and you made one little mistake and you lose. It was like a 6-hour game. Oh, and guess what? In 20 minutes, you have to play your second game. That's utterly ridiculous, but that's one of the realities of these weekend events. Now, I will say this. I'm going to give you a strategy, the most important strategy to avoid tilt and to have a successful tournament in general, and hopefully gain some rating points. And here it is. You need to win your first game. That is my advice. Now, that's true for club level events as well, but especially in these weekend events where it's one game after the other, win your first game. That is huge. I'm reminded of that term first in vigorish from poker. It's not the same thing, but it kind of reminds me of that. It's the idea that like in a hand of poker, if you're the first person in the pot and you make a big raise, the idea is that anyone who calls you has to have a stronger hand than they would have if they opened themselves. So it kind of gives you an advantage. When you win that first game, why is that so advantageous? Because number one, it gives you a tremendous confidence boost. It's like, you have one in the bag, right? You won that first game, and it's also a little bit of insurance. It's like mental insurance. You have that win already. So if you lose your second game, it's like, oh, okay, but I won the first game, so you probably won't tilt. If you win the first game, and let's say you lose rounds 2 and 3, even then you may not tilt as much because you still have that game in the bag. So winning that first game is huge, because if you lose your first game in a weekend tournament, it's already kind of setting the tone. And I would say if you lose your first game, the most important advice, win your second game. Because if you're 0-2, that's where the tilt might kick in. All right, so definitely try to win your first game at all costs. I mean, obviously, don't do anything unsportsmanlike, but just that first win is huge. Win that first game. I now want to talk about the sunk cost fallacy, because that is a major reason why players don't drop out of an event when arguably they should. So what is the sunk cost fallacy? I've spoken about it before, but it applies here. It's worth coming back to. A sunk cost is basically time or money spent that you can't get back. It's a sunk cost. So if instead of doing something productive, you sit on your couch and scroll through your social media feed for 3 hours straight, those 3 hours of time are a sunk cost. You're not getting it back. That type of thing. And the sunk cost fallacy is the idea that you should continue doing something because you already spent so much time or money on it already. And the sunk cost fallacy is huge when it comes to chess tournament psychology. It basically means that people are not willing to cut their losses when they should. I'm going to give you the dictionary definition. This is from, I think, dictionary.com, of the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is a phenomenon whereby a person is reluctant to abandon a strategy or course of action because they have invested heavily in it, even when it is clear that abandonment would be more beneficial. So examples at a chess tournament of the sunk cost fallacy would be, well, I paid the entry fee, or I carved out the entire weekend for this after a lot of planning. Okay, but then you could withdraw and then just go see the sites or do something in that town, right? Those are all sunk cost fallacy ideas. And the reason it's a fallacy is it's probably, if you're tilting and you're just not going to play well, you're better off walking away and not losing more tournament points. That's actually better than sticking with it and playing poorly just because you played the entry fee. Now, this is my opinion. Now, let's talk about buys and the role that plays in sunk cost. I recommend taking buys strategically so that you're not playing 2 games a day the whole time. That's my recommendation. That's what I would do. Now, many people are not going to do that because, they want their money's worth, right? That's the sunk cost. And I get it. You're paying a lot of money. If it's a 7-round tournament and you're taking buys and you only play 5 games or 4 games, people feel like they're getting gypped. But I look at it this way. I'd rather play 4 or 5 games out of 7 and do really well and have a better chance of doing well than playing 7 games, maybe tilting or not having the endurance for it, and then I play poorly. Now, I spoke with James Altucher about this. We all know James Altucher. He's on a quest to get master. I'll put a link in the episode. He was on this podcast. It was a fascinating conversation. You definitely want to check that out if you haven't. And I was talking to James about this, and I said, have you thought about taking, for the endurance factor, have you thought about taking buys, like just not playing every round? And he said right away, he goes, I don't want to do that. I want to play. I'm paying the entry fee. And I was kind of asking him, like, do you think taking buys would help? And he agreed, it might, but he just doesn't want to do that. And I respect that decision. A lot of people feel that way, but I really think taking strategic buys can help you. I think it's better to play only, again, 4 out of 7 games well than play 7 games out of 7 and you have some games that really didn't go well because you were exhausted and you should have taken a buy. But the sunk cost fallacy is definitely a major reason why people don't drop out, and they should. So basically, just to kind of wrap this all up, you should withdraw if you're tilting and you're not playing well and you just feel like it's all about revenge and you're frustrated and you're not playing the disciplined game that you prepared for. If you're just in that emotional state, you're better off just walking away and just accept that that wasn't your tournament, because you're just going to end up losing more rating points than you already did. So yes, I do believe there are times where withdrawing is the best choice. You need to stop the bleeding. You need to cut your losses. On the other hand, withdrawing after being upset in round 1, that's a little absurd, but many people do it. Now, one more thing we're going to discuss. Should you play up? Should you play in a section that's much higher than your rating class? So if you're rated 1500, rather than play in the under 1600 section, should you play in the under 2000 section? Now, with playing up, people like playing higher rated opponents, myself included, because it's viewed as the quickest way to boost your rating because you have draw odds, right? If you beat a higher rated opponent, you get a ton of rating points. If you draw them, you also get some rating points. And if you lose to a higher rated opponent, you're only going to get a minimal hit on your rating. So it's like 3 ways to win in a way. If you win, you get a ton of points. If you draw, you get some rating points. And if you lose, you get a minimal hit, right? What could be better than that? Playing a chess opponent where no matter what the result is, your rating is either going to increase or it's only going to take a minimal hit. That's what we all want, right? Now, here's my take on this. Playing up, I think, is good, but I would only go 1 section higher. It may be moot because others in your rating range may have the same idea, right? That's life's worst kept secret. When you come up with a great idea, a zillion other people did as well, right? I'm going to go to this store at 9 in the morning, right, when it opens, because it won't be as crowded, but yet, 500 other people had the same idea, right? So you may want to play up, but a lot of other people in your rating class may do the same thing. So you may not end up getting the higher rated opponents that you want, at least not every round. Now, playing up more than 1 section, I think, is silly. Like some people will say like, oh, I'm only 1600, but I'm going to play in the open section. I would not recommend doing that. Now they're going to say, I don't care if I lose a lot of games. It's going to be great. Trust me, it's going to bother you. You say that now, like, oh, I don't care if I lose a lot of games. But when you start losing 2-3 games in a row, it's going to bother you. So I would not play up more than 1 section. That's my recommendation. Now, another falsehood is that, well, if I play up, I'll avoid playing kids, right? Because I'm only rated 1,000. There's going to be a lot of kids in that section, so I'm going to play up. But that's not always the case because those kids might choose to play up as well. And even in the higher section, there's going to be a lot of kids as well. So the idea that you'll avoid kids by playing up, that's not necessarily going to be the case. Now, for me, if I do start weekend tournaments again occasionally, I would play in a seniors event. I mean, I'm over 50 now, so I qualify. So I'm officially old. I'm depressing myself as I'm saying this. No, but seniors events for me would kind of check all the boxes as far as what I'm looking for, or it would at least remove some of the negative things. Now, here's what I like about seniors events. It's my understanding most of them are just 1 game per day, which is huge. I mean, I think regular tournaments should be that way also. But anyway, it's 1 game per day. Obviously, you're not going to have kids. My personal opening repertoire plays very well against a lot of seniors. Now, I'm kind of stereotyping now, but like the London, I have some modern lines that I use in the Nimzo and Queen's Indian. a lot of seniors may not be familiar with those. There's a lot of seniors, they think every chess game is supposed to be 1 E4, E5, right? if you open with like D4 or Knight F3, they think that's weird. So I think my repertoire would work very well. And also, a lot of seniors will be at their floor, presumably. So you can snatch a lot of rating points that way. Now, that may sound kind of cheesy, you're kind of playing the system, but that's the reality of the rating system. So in other words, with rating floors, their listed rating is higher than their current strength. So when you see those even numbers, those even multiples of 100, like 1600, 1700, 1800 as their listed rating, those are all rating floors, right? Jesse Cry was talking about this when he was playing in a seniors tournament. So your opponent, if you see that rating is exactly a multiple of 100, that's a rating floor. So your opponent could be listed as 1800, but they might actually be 1500 strength. So you can actually snatch some rating points that way. And every club has at least one player like that, where the listed rating is like 2000, but they're really 1700 strength. And of course, everyone likes playing that person because it's like playing a low rated player, but getting the points as if you were playing a higher rated player. Again, I know that's kind of playing the system, but if I'm being honest, that's kind of an advantage of playing a lot of experienced players who are at their floor. So I could be paired with someone with a listed rating of 1900, but if that's a rating floor, they might be only 1700 or 1600 strength, but you're getting credit as if you played someone 1900, that type of thing. So for me, seniors events, that's something I'm going to look into now that I'm eligible for it. It seems like the playing conditions and the structure is a lot better than a standard weekend Swiss tournament. So that will do it for this week. I will put links for everything that I mentioned. We covered a lot of ground. Really appreciate you listening. And as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.